I think we're live. Hello, can you guys hear me? Yeah, I'm a little bit late. Had to get everything together. Was trying at the last minute to figure out. There's an invite link for in case I wanted someone to join the to be a guest on the video. And I copied it earlier, but I copied it to my phone, and I'm filming from my phone, so I don't know how to copy it on the desktop. So I guess I'm doing it alone again because I didn't actually hear from anyone that was interested in guest starring today. One of these days I'll do that in advance, and then I'll do a video with a guest star. Today I have a lot to talk about anyway, so it's probably all right that I don't. I see someone already gave a super chat. That's wonderful. Thank you. Before we even started. And that's Eric C, who says, I had the misfortune of randomly ending up in a conversation with Jeffro on Twitter. Wow, what a horrible human being. Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate your super chat. So as usual with my live streams, if I'm not one of these people that says that only people who super chat I'm gonna read their comments, because I like reading the comments of everybody who is watching, and I'll repeat whichever ones and respond to whichever ones I find interesting, right? But of course, if you do a super chat, then you're pretty much guaranteeing that I will read that super chat out loud, unless it's something that'll get me banned or demonetized or something like that, so as long as you're somewhat reasonable, we'll be okay. Right, so there's a good group of people already. Wow, that's great. Let's see, there's some messages here that were being held for review. All right, so no, I have so Elle said maybe I hadn't accounted for time zones. No, I checked daylight savings, so we're good. I was just getting my coffee ready and making sure that everything was set. Because once I get on here, I don't know how long it's going to be. We might be an hour, we might be 3 hours. You never know. So I might as well be cautious about this and have everything set up. So, Max says, what's the deal with RPG Match? Well, I wasn't going to talk about it too much here, but apparently it's some sort of a website for people to find online gaming groups, I'm assuming, or maybe real life gaming groups. I don't know. But the thing is, on Twitter, they've pointed out basically that they're not interested in white players, which seems like insane, right? Like, I guess it's meant to be something super woke. And I wasn't able to catch a lot of the controversy because they pre-banned me, which is pretty much everything you need to know about this, right? If they've got me pre-banned, it means that they're obviously of a certain persuasion. Ryan David says hello, hello pundit, says Ryan David. Hi Ryan, good to see you on here. Will M says Meatball looks like my cat with longer fur. And Starlaw says, let the Meatball show begin. Well, we'll see if Meatball shows up. Lately, she's been lazing around a lot. Elle says, pundit's so desperate for money, he can't disable ads on streams. Ads started and broke the app and it crashed. Well, I don't know anything about that, to be honest. I didn't. I'm very. You guys have to remember, right? I mean, I'm Gen X, but I'm a boomer when it comes to technology. So I probably didn't notice the monetization settings properly, and if that causes anyone problems, I apologize. Light After Darkness says, safety tools check, combat wheelchair check, let's go. Oh, and then Eric C correctly predicts the future. He says, Pundit will probably admit he's so technologically illiterate he doesn't know how to disable them. You are correct, Eric. So let's see what else. Elle says, Eric, true, it's the monetization checkbox. Uncheck it. No ads on streams, but the channel still gets super. Yeah, I don't like the idea of, you know, people are watching a live stream and then it gets interrupted with an ad. That's no good. So I'm sorry about that. I'll try to figure it out for next time. Ryan David, I think he's talking about RPG Match. He says, let me know, Ryan, if this is what you were talking about. I spoke with the creator, and it's more of a foot in the mouth situation where emotions were running high. Either that or damage control, only time will tell. Well, not sure about that, right? Because, you know, they, like I said, they banned me before the controversy even started, before I even knew about them. So they obviously do have a political persuasion. Roy Goodman says, is his audio cutting out? Is my audio cutting out? Is everybody hearing me okay? Let me know if there's any trouble. Audio is great, says Chris. Hey, Chris, how's it going? You guys should all welcome Chris Miller there, who is hard at work trying to get Baptism of Fire ready for publication. David Brown says, I've successfully implemented the monotheism of Lion and Dragon into my Keep on the Borderlands campaign, and next session is the Inquisition. Thanks, Pundit. All right. Well, we've already got a good crowd here. I kind of want to make sure that everybody who's gonna like be coming in gets in here. You know, maybe I'll wait until about the 10-minute mark to start my main topic of conversation, which is the Book of Many Things. Maybe meanwhile, I'll comment that there are certain things coming up. One of them is Baptism of Fire. That's in theory, maybe if Chris needs to make an adjustment, he might want to tell us now, but I believe the plan is that it should be published by the end of the year. Before that, probably, there's going to be another RPG Pundit Presents issue coming out from Spectre Press, which is going to be called Medieval Dream Magic, and it's another type of medieval magic that I hadn't introduced yet to the Lion and Dragon rule set. So that'll probably be pretty interesting. And also, I'm continuing in preparations, and it's kind of going a little bit slow, but it really looks like it's going to happen. I'm going to start a new series of small products similar to RPG Pundit Presents on Giant Slayer Games. So I think most of you probably know Giant Slayer Games by now, and it's one of these companies that's kind of trying to set up an alternative to drive through. And I wanted to do something with them, but you know, most of my publishers right now, Giant Slayer is very, very new and very small. And so, you know, my publishers probably don't feel like it's worth it to put my actual books on there. But I talked to them and I proposed something that I think also is going to be something that they're going to probably turn into a service on the website itself, but I'm going to be the first one to have it, I guess, which is a subscription service. So I'm going to have, for a single price, and I don't know exactly what the price is going to be now, but it's going to be a reasonable price. Obviously, it'll be somewhere. It'll definitely be below $10. It'll probably be somewhere between $5 and $10. It's got to be worked out with Giant Slayer because it's going to be a profit sharing kind of thing, where people will subscribe, and for each month that they're subscribed, they're going to get 2 issues of the Pundit Files, I think is what we're going to call it. And each of these will be, you know, a product that will be, you know, sometimes it'll be an adventure, similar to RPG Pundit Presents. Sometimes it'll be an adventure, sometimes it'll be a supplement, sometimes it'll be a setting location, sometimes it'll be, you know, maybe monsters or magic items or things like that. It'll be for a variety of my products, or, you know, generic stuff that can be used in multiple products. All of it'll be OSR basically. And so, you know, I think you're going to get a good deal for your subscription if you sign up to it, because you'll get 2 products a month, and that'll be. I mean, it'll probably usually be more, but it'll be a minimum of 10 pages combined, right? But whether it's if you have a supplement, the first supplement of the month might be 4 pages, and the other one might be 6 or something like that. But more often, it'll probably be that both of them will be something like, 7 or 8 pages or something along those lines. And there's some products that are going to be bigger than others, but they're all going to be interesting, and so you'll always get new things that are worth looking at least, and that'll all be very playable, of course. And if you like the sort of stuff I've produced in the past, you're going to be very likely to enjoy the Pundit Files products too, especially if you're a fan of the. Sorry, I'm looking for there it is. If you're a fan of the RPG Pundit Presents series. So keep your eyes open for that. That should be starting pretty soon. I think we're at the final kind of stages. We're working out the publishing part of it, and then it's going to be okay, I think. Chris Miller says he's pretty confident he can finish Baptism of Fire by the end of the year. Very good. What else? Starlaw says, if someone builds a wheelchair access ramp for the dungeon, would it be wrong for them to then trap the access ramps? Tarantula says, for a period when magic was heresy, there was an awful lot of magic in the Middle Ages. Well, see, the thing is, magic in itself wasn't seen as heresy for most of the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, there were obviously certain things. I mean, if the magic in question involved making pacts with demons or venerating gods other than the Christian God, then yes, that was blasphemous and heretical, right? But if magic, most medieval magic, and this is something a lot of modern occultists kind of miss, because really the magic that modern occultists use today is descended from the medieval Hermetic tradition, right? And the thing is that medieval magic was overwhelmingly Christian in context, right? And it was, a lot of medieval magic, the rituals involved, reciting from the Book of Psalms, and you had to pray and ritually purify yourself. You had to do ritual bathing, and you were invoking God to assist you in performing this work of what they sometimes called natural philosophy, to be able to affect some change for the glory of God and the betterment of humanity, right? So especially in like the high magic tradition, right? I mean, peasant magic was more about kind of manipulating what they saw as part of the natural world, right? They looked at things like sympathetic magic, right? That you could do something via these connections in the natural world that could alter things like the weather or crops or things like that. But high magic was largely a kind of religious exercise, and part of the point of this is that, like, for much of the Middle Ages, for the early Middle Ages especially, almost all the magicians were monks. That monasteries were the center of magical practice for a large part of the Middle Ages. And it was only a little bit later, when like the universities started coming up around the 13th century, that you started to get magicians, because you had to be very educated, right? You had to study these ancient texts and things like that, and you had to know the Bible, for example. So it was only once you had an educated class that weren't monks that you started seeing lay people practicing it. So that's one of the things people often get wrong about what magic was like in the Middle Ages. There was good magic and bad magic, basically. Let's see what else here. Ryan Nilsson says, "Hey Pundit, I recently ordered Cults of Chaos. Love what I see from that book, man. Thank you. I'm especially proud of Cults of Chaos. I think it's in terms of mechanical design, one of the best things I ever wrote. It's so incredibly useful, and as you've now found out, and probably quite a few of you already knew, you can use it in like less than 10 minutes. You can create an entire enemy group with subplots, with complications, with lots of interesting details, all by just following the generator. And they're never going to be the same twice, or they're never going to be exactly the same anyway. So it allows for a wide range of different medieval enemy groups that you can pop into, like an adventure, or use as inspiration for your setting or whatever. Janot says mostly for L&D. I guess you're asking about the pundit files. Well, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's obviously going to be tied to L&D, to Lion and Dragon. There might be some. There'll likely be some Gonzo stuff also. There might be some stuff for Star Adventure or the Invisible College. But yeah, a lot of it is going to be for Lion and Dragon. Some of it's going to be kind of in the Dark Albion setting. Some of it is going to be in Sword and Caravan. Some of it will probably be for Baptism of Fire once that comes out. But a lot of it is also going to be stuff that you can like take out and put into your, if you're running, I don't know, Labyrinth Lord or Axe or something like that, you can put it into there too. Seafire says, any updates on the game set in Poland? That's Baptism of Fire. We just had the publisher back. Baptism of Fire is here, Seafire, and says that it should be out by the end of the year. Spencer Wright says, I'm sure WotC's next product will cover the evils of colonization and othering. Well, I don't know. I'm not that sure. I'm going to talk about that a little bit now when I get onto the Book of Many Things. Let's see what else we've got here. Justin Sutton said, I just bought Thralls of the Jade Queen. That's one of the adventures of the for the Last Sun that was in Pundit Presents. And yeah, you enjoyed how creative it is. That's good. Well, those adventures are pretty good, I think. Comanizer said, think how different the world would be if magic worked in the Middle Ages. Well, for the medieval paradigm, magic did work in the Middle Ages. So like that's the issue. I've often got some people saying, oh, well, this isn't, Lion and Dragon isn't really medieval authentic because magic actually works and miracles actually happen. Well, in the medieval world, everybody understood that magic actually worked and miracles actually happened, right? It was a part of the medieval worldview. So you can't make a game that has a genuine medieval worldview if you don't actually accept their perspective of how reality worked, right? It's like, we believe in quantum physics, right? And a lot of that is very theoretical. And it could be that some of it is totally wrong, right? But it's a part of our worldview. It's not as big a part of our worldview as magic is, say, but there's a lot of things that when you're in a social paradigm may not actually be physically real, but it has an enormous effect on society. So you have to treat it as real if you want to create a setting that reflects that society. What else now? Ryan Nielsen says, I think Cults of Chaos is a real hidden gem. You should promote it more. Maybe do a video where you roll up some cults. Yeah, maybe I'll do that sometime. Because it is actually the sort of thing you could do I could do in a video very easily because it's that quick. Roy Goodman says, I'd love to see some stuff for droids and starships for Star Adventure. Well, I'm very slowly, and this is very, very early on right now. It's kind of in the very early planning stages. I'm working on making up a setting. Now that my Star Adventure campaign ended, I'm working on making up an original setting for Star Adventure. So that might happen in the context of that, but I don't know when that'll come out. I mean, maybe it'll be something in a year or two. Spencer Wright says pundits work is first rated, is cheap at twice the price. Well, that might be literally true, because I always make an effort to make the product as affordable as it can reasonably be, while still providing an adequate profit to myself and the publisher, right? So we never try to overcharge, you know. I don't think you'll ever see $100 box set from me. Roy Goodman says, pundit, take your time. I'm in no hurry. My next game is going to be Sword and Caravan. Well, I can tell you guys, I'm running my Sword and Caravan campaign. I've been running it for quite a while now, and my players just love that game. It's just been so interesting. Now, of course, I'm not running it in a very traditional style in the context of, let's say, OSR play, because I'm very much running it as what you could call a picaresque game, right? The characters are going along the Silk Road. I mean, at first, the first half of the campaign was a little bit more traditional, because they were in the Crusades, right? They were going along with Richard Lionheart fighting the Third Crusade. But when that ended, then the next step of the campaign, which has been going on for months now, has been that they're traveling across the Silk Road, protecting a monk who has been tasked with trying to reach out, now that they can travel after the peace treaty between Saladin and Richard Lionheart. They're going out along the Silk Road, trying to recover contact with the Christian communities that are found all along the Silk Road in the various territories. And so a lot of the adventuring is them going from city to city and discovering things in the cities. And, you know, there's adventure stuff that happens along the way. They just got through a very, very dangerous incursion in the Zagros Mountains, where there were these mysterious burial mounds, and it turned out to have a really dangerous undead in one of them that killed a couple of the player characters. But that's okay. Now one of the players is now back playing, and he's going to be playing a Sufi, so it'll be the first time there's a Sufi player character in the campaign, and the other one's playing a local Christian Arab who's a magister, who's a magician, right? And so it's quite interesting how that game is evolving, and everybody's, you know, every session has been just, especially lately, just really fantastic. I think that you know, a lot of people don't really play those kind of campaigns of like traveling from place to place, and a lot of it being kind of being caught up in unusual adventures that aren't just like dungeon crawls or missions, you know, like basically running on the kind of encounters you're likely to find, and the interactions of the places that you arrive and the cultures of those places. But that can be really interesting play with the right party. It has to be, you know, a party that's interested in doing a lot of gaming that involves the role playing of your character and the discovery of the world. But I love those kind of campaigns when they work out right. Mark C says, I just picked up Lion and Dragon. Is Silk Road compatible? I guess you mean is Sword and Caravan compatible? So Mark, Sword and Caravan is a setting for Lion and Dragon. It's specifically for that. I mean, you can use it because it's largely system neutral. You can use Sword and Caravan with other OSR games, but it's mainly meant to be for Lion and Dragon. So like the classes, the section on the new character classes that are in Sword and Caravan are character classes that are designed in the Lion and Dragon format. You know, all of that sort of thing. The monsters are in the same format. So yes, it is absolutely compatible. Luctus Faust says, did you get a chance to read the Babylon PDF I sent you? I'm afraid not. I've been very, very busy, but I have received it, and I am going to take a look at it, Luctus. So you have my word that as soon as I have enough time, because I've been doing a lot of work lately, but I am going to give it a proper look, and I will get back to you on that. There's a lot of people talking about therapy-themed RPGs. Apparently Clownfish, I heard that Clownfish was doing an RPG. I wasn't taking it very seriously because, like, you know, it sounds like kind of a bit of amateur hour, right? Like, I mean, I love Clownfish TV, the channel, right? They have a really good channel. But, you know, just saying, well, I'm going to make my own role-playing game, it doesn't, you know, that's harder than it looks, right? It's like that sounds like the type of person that's played some D&D and maybe a few other games, and now they're just going to make their own version. But I guess if they're getting some help, then it depends on what the quality of the help is, right? And it sounds as though some of you think that the quality of the help that they're getting is not very good. Maybe someone should tell them that. Will M says, I've been reading Real Cyclopedia, page 5 says it'll use male pronouns. And he quotes, centuries of use have made these pronouns neutral, and we feel their use provides for clear and concise written text. Woke WotC would never do that today. Yeah, that's absolutely true. They certainly would not do that today. Very, very funny. All right. So I think I'm caught up. I can't believe it, but I am. Yeah, I am at the moment. Of course, that's about to change because I'm gonna go into my topic. First, let me just clean my pipe here and let's see if there's anything else. Any recommended readings for what my players could do once they reach the East in Sword and Caravan? Well, I mean, obviously in Sword and Caravan itself, I go into a lot of detail about the different regions, their rulers, and if you want more information about that sort of thing, now there's Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road, which is an incredibly good source book specifically for Sword and Caravan, because it details pretty much every historical NPC that I mentioned in Sword and Caravan. And on top of that, it also has, it has their stats, and then it also has an expanded timeline that gives you more specific ideas of, like, at every point in the timeline from Sword and Caravan, what your characters can be doing depending on where they find themselves in the Silk Road at the time. So that's one good possibility there. Like, that's something you can look at and get some ideas from. Chris Miller also says try Marco Polo. Well, yeah, Marco Polo. It is good to look at his travel log, but keep in mind there is a before and after in the Silk Road. Marco Polo is about a bit less than a century after the time of the Sword and Caravan setting. So it's after Genghis Khan went through the Silk Road, devastating it. So it's a very different place after that. Because one of the reasons I wanted to do the Silk Road at the same time of the Third Crusades, roughly, like, because the Third Crusade happens in 1191. Genghis Khan sweeps through the Silk Road starting in the 1220s. So that's a 30-year period. And in that 30-year period is when you had a number of different, very interesting cultures and kingdoms that each had control over some pieces of the Silk Road, and they were constantly warring with each other. And so there were areas of the Silk Road where like control cities where the control would switch back and forth over the years between one group or another. And over the course of those 30 years, the certain groups ended up gaining in power, and others were destroyed completely. And ironically, right before Genghis Khan invades, one of the kingdoms of the Silk Road was pretty much poised to be the dominant force of the Silk Road. And like, after 30 years of growth, then all of a sudden they made the mistake of pissing off Genghis Khan, and that was the end of it. But in any case, there are entire cities, there are several entire cities, some of the biggest and most important cities of the Silk Road in the 1190s that literally do not exist in any way by the time that Marco Polo goes through them. So, like, Marco Polo is in a way traveling through the ruins of the Silk Road, right? I mean, by the time he's there, there's already rebuilding going on, because the Mongols themselves eventually became kind of occupiers of many areas, and then some of the areas started to revive, but it was a Silk Road that was in a lot worse shape than the one in Sword and Caravan. What else have we got here? Ryan Nilsson says, do you feel more of an affinity to Gandalf or Santa Claus when you smoke your pipe? Asking for a friend. Well, I don't know if I feel an affinity with either of them, but I certainly do feel an affinity with the great J.R.R. Tolkien, who, much like me, it said that he once said that every day I wake up and the first thought that comes to my head is, oh, good, another day to smoke pipes. That's pretty much how I feel about it too. Mark C says, I've always wanted to run a game in the Holy Land. Well, Sword and Caravan lets you do that too, right? Because I cover the entire area of the Holy Land at the time of the Third Crusade, and the timeline goes from the Third Crusade, the Fourth, and the Fifth Crusade, as well as the German Crusade, which happens in between there, and the Children's Crusade, which is just a disaster, right? So you can have a campaign of Sword and Caravan where you never go past, say, Damascus or whatever. You never go to the actual Silk Road. You stay in the Levant, and the timeline has all the details of everything that happens there too, right? Like all the conflicts between the Crusader states and Saladin's heirs after he's gone and all of that, So and it goes into quite a lot of detail about how especially the Fifth Crusade happens, because the Fourth Crusade never gets to the Middle East either. They end up going and sacking Constantinople, right? But you can play all of the intrigues and the conflicts that are happening just in the Middle East at that time in Sword and Caravan without ever bothering to go to like Nishapur or China, Gestro Games goes, what's the deal with the OSR subreddit banning Alexander Maxwell? Well, basically, the OSR subreddit is a hole. It's just the most useless thing in the world, right? If you want to talk about the OSR, you're much better off going to the rpgsite.com. There you can actually talk about it. Otomanjira says, wasn't there a Jewish guy who went out east and wrote about it? Was that in the song or Yuan? Well, I'm trying to think of who you're referring to. There were several Jewish guys that traveled along the Silk Road, right? And there were a lot of Jews living along, communities of Jews in the Silk Road as well, just like there were communities of Christians, right? So yeah, I'm not sure about the specific reference. Maybe that was in the Yuan period, which I haven't researched nearly as much as the Song period. The Song are my favorite period of Chinese history. So yeah. The fact is, obviously, Marco Polo was not the first guy to get there. He was just the first guy to write a really successful book about it. The first guy from Europe, I mean. Ray Goodman says, I kind of hope at some point Pundit will tackle feudal Japan. I know a lot of people love Japan, and I admit that there's a lot of very interesting parts to Japanese history. But, I've always been way more fascinated in China and Chinese history and Chinese culture than about Japan. So it's very unlikely that I'll ever do a Japanese game, but I'm very likely at some point to do a Song Dynasty source book for the for Sword and Caravan, basically, or for Lion and Dragon. Osiris goes, so Pundit, what crazy D&D news after? Well, I'm going to be talking to you guys today about the Book of Many Things. And let me just fill up my next pipe here before I do that. What am I going to smoke? Smoke a Ben Wade oversized. Yeah, Ben Wade oversized pipe. It's technically a Canadian, I guess. It's just such a gigantic Canadian, you can barely call it one. Let's see here. Ray Goodman says it would be cool if Pundit collaborated with the Metatron. Are you like referring to the highest angel? Like I should collaborate with him? Are you meaning I should like invoke the Metatron and do something with him, like I don't know, a shared project or something? I'm not quite sure. Unless the Metatron means somebody else, like there's some guy called that, and I just don't know who you're talking about. Oda Manjiro says the Genpei War Kamakura period would be great for Pundit to do, and so yeah, okay, I'm sure, but so is the the War of the Three Kingdoms or something like that. It's, I'm sorry, I'm just much more of a fan of China than of Japan. If I ever did anything to do with Japan, what I would probably do it would be the Imjin War. the war between Japan and Korea, because that was quite fascinating. Of course, in that one, the Koreans were pretty much the good guys. So, though they were just so useless for the most part, there was only a few of them that somehow managed to save themselves. Look, Soida says, have you ever read Michael Hobson's book, The Occult Renaissance Church of Rome? No, I haven't, but that does your description of it does sound very interesting. Will says, how about an Egyptian game? Well, yeah, I don't know. I am not in ancient Egypt, which I assume is what you mean. I mean, if you want me to do something about the Fatimid dynasty or something, I guess I could do that. But ancient Egypt is not one of the areas that I kind of specialize in. So if I were to ever do an ancient Egyptian game, I'd have to do quite a lot of study first. Oh, Metatron is a historical YouTuber. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I thought you meant like the highest of angels. Ryan Nelson says, I see your brother, the Mystic Ty, earned all my Blue Lodge degrees in Airdrie, Alberta. Oh, look at that. Well, I was also originally from the Grand Lodge of Alberta, so we have something in common, Ryan. Reziel says, I have a pipe, but it's not as fancy as yours are. Well, actually, this is not a super fancy pipe. This is, when I was young, I would always want to try to like buy, especially once I started, when I got a job that would allow me to have like some extra money, I always wanted to buy the most expensive pipes I could, right? Because I thought those are going to be the best ones. Of course, very expensive pipes are very, they're always going to smoke quite well. So they are good, right? But now that I'm older, what I really love to do is find a pipe that is not as expensive, but that smokes as good as the expensive ones. And there was this Ben Wade Red Dot series that came out where like these pipes were only like $70 to $85, which is for a pipe is very cheap. And yet they smoke incredibly well. So that's what I like to do now. I like to find pipes that are not that expensive, but that are like that I can tell that, by research or by looking at the grain that I suspect, because obviously with cheaper pipes, you could never be 100% sure just how good it's going to get, right? But I like to try to see if I can pick one. And lately, nowadays, after many years of experience, I'm often quite good at spotting the ones that are going to smoke really well without having to break the higher end spectrum of pipe costs. Chris Miller tells Will you can play Anchor Kingdom of the Gods if you like Sumerian and Egyptian mythology mixed with ancient alien theory. Yeah. The only thing about Anchor is that it's not OSR, but apart from that, it's I did review it and I thought it was quite well done. It was so well done that I was so impressed by the production above all else that's what like I actually wrote to Chris and told him when I was about to do Sword and Caravan that he should give me a pitch. I usually every time I say I'm going to make a new book, small press publishers usually come to me with pitches as to why they should publish it. And in his case, I went to him and told him, if you're interested, you should give me a pitch because you're gonna be a front runner no matter what, based on how good Anchor looks. Osiris says you should do a video with Shadiversary or Carl Benjamin. Yeah, well, if they ever wanted to, I could. I mean, they both have much bigger YouTube channels than me, right? So it's I think that the thing there is that they would have to. I guess they'd have to know like what my level of influence is in the gaming world and why it would be interesting to have me there, I guess. So I don't know. I think you probably have to tell those people about me rather than telling me about them. So it's not the sort of situation where if I went to them and said, "Oh yeah, I'm willing to be on your show," that they're necessarily going to even know who I am. Jestro says, "In your opinion, what's the best New English setting adventure book like Sleepy Hollow or Salem with the Trials type of thing?" Geez, I really don't have any idea. Yeah, no, I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure. I haven't run into anything in particular in that kind of line that I would say. Um, Raziel says, pipes, if I want, sorry, pundit, if I want to learn more about pipes, where would you point me? Well, nowadays there's a lot of very good YouTube channels about pipe smoking. I don't have one, but I've seen a lot of ones that are quite well done, and some of them have like the kind of, a lot of them have very good like introductory videos about pipe smoking. So look for ones that have a good viewership, and that'll probably give you a clue that the guy knows what he's talking about. All right, so let's get to the main topic, shall we? So today, we can talk about other things after. I'll answer more questions, obviously, but the main thing I wanted to talk about is that I took a look at the, what's being said, specifically what D&D is saying on its official channel, which I always find funny because, that channel has more than 200,000 subscribers, and the number of views they get, I have videos that get more views sometimes than that, right? So it's, I think that's a sign of the current state of WotC, right? Like, people will not just go and watch their stuff because their stuff is usually, well, I mean, usually it's advertising, of course, but there are ways to do that and be useful, and there's ways that aren't, right? And of course, so this is like this was their preview, their deep dive, they called it, into the Book of Many Things, which, if you don't know, is their upcoming product, which is a box set. It's going to come as a box set that is going to include what they call the Deck of Many Things. I'll get more into that later. Plus a book, plus a couple of other doodads, and the whole thing to put together is going to cost like $100. So it's a very expensive price point. And this, first and foremost, I should point out, it gives a lot of credence to the argument that what they're going to be doing actually is to start making products that are meant to be deluxe products, right? Like that's not a product for the mass market, right? You're not going to get your average D&D gamer buying $100 box set. So this is like, I think that, first of all, is a sign that they're shifting their trend away from the idea of writing books that a lot of people are going to buy to writing expensive products that are going to be just like special collectible things for people, which I suspect will be the trend after one D&D happens. When one D&D comes out, I think most of D&D stuff is going to be happening only on the VTT. And so then, in terms of actual publishing, what you'll probably get is the 3 core books. And then you're going to get occasional super special products that are going to be like these expensive, deluxe-looking collectible things, right? That aren't necessarily, because there's a couple of reasons for that, right? Like, one is that they know that their market is no longer very good on the mass market level. They don't have even a really good distributor anymore for bookstores or anything. And aside from that, it's also that these sorts of products are going to be, that it's going to be for people who might not necessarily play with these things, right? So a lot of cases, when you get these really fancy products, like be it fancy books, but especially stuff that has like all these additional things in it, that's for people to buy because it's going to look good, right? And it's not necessarily going to be something that they're going to use. So they're hoping to capture it's more merchandising almost than a product, and as a product, it wouldn't necessarily have to be especially usable, So that, I think, is the first thing to take in mind about that. And I see some of you are mentioning the autistic lesbian paladins. Yes, we are going to talk about that. But that's only one part of the whole thing about what I've discovered looking at that video about the Book of Many Things. So I'm going to note here, L says, pundit, Q3 Hasbro says D&D is full steam ahead on digital and expects 10 million per quarter in 2024 for D&D. Yeah, well, we'll see. And Chris Miller says, yeah, WotC's going to shift away from mass producing books and only produce expensive collector's items. Yes, their bread and butter will be digital sales on the BTT. Yes. You guys might have recently seen my video on bastions on the new, like, you know, like it looked as though D&D was going to be like, oh, we're bringing back dominions and strongholds, right? But it's not. It's not that. It's not that they've suddenly discovered the value of like the sort of stuff that you know, Adventure Conquer King has, or that they think that players are going to be really into like doing Dominion level play. No, because it's nothing like that. What it is a special magic dream home that you have for your character that shows up when you're level 5, and then you can add on parts to it over time as your character goes up in level. And so all of these things, imagine it's on a VTT. So suddenly you get your basic little house when you hit level 5 with your character on the virtual tabletop. And that part's going to probably be free, but then you want to add on stuff to it. Guess what? Microtransactions, right? This is all part of shifting D&D into a game meant to be played as an online digital for-profit game, right? Yeah, Al pointed out Hasbro stock dropped $12 after that earnings call. Liabilities for Hasbro is $6.1 billion. The market cap's only $6.8 billion. Yes, a lot of people are saying that means Hasbro's in trouble. I mean, it certainly means Hasbro's in the toilet, right? But it, you know, I don't think you should expect that that's going to mean that Hasbro is going to go broke or something like that. A lot of corporations can survive worse than that, you know. And Hasbro's a pretty big company, but it might mean that they're going to have to reverse trends on things, you know. And I think that's part of what I'm going to talk about now. Terran Chul says 120 Australian is the average shelf price for non-WotC RPGs here in Australia. Even the 5e core books are like 60 Australian each. So I don't know. I guess the Book of Many Things is going to be like $1,200 Australian. I don't know what your funny money is like. Al says Jeremy Crawford's Barbie Dream House comes to D&D. Yes, that is exactly the idea, right? I bet there'll be all kinds of options to customize in exchange for microtransactions. That's exactly right. Chris Miller says all of Pundit's products are less than $30 Australian on Amazon. Yeah, but I'm guessing that if you add like shipping and stuff, it probably gets bigger than that. I mean, I don't know. Right. So the Book of Many Things. First of all, I say that it has their version of the Deck of Many Things. So the first thing that they do is that they're, of course, going to expand the Deck of Many Things, right? So the Deck of Many Things is a magic item that has been in D&D since first edition, basically. And in all of the editions that matter, it's been fairly consistent. They've made little changes to it over time, but not really significant ones. And it was originally 22 cards, so that it was the same number as what you have in the major arcana of a tarot deck. So I think that the idea there was that you could take the tarot cards and create an equivalent to them in the Deck of Many Things, right? So you could, so the player, if a DM or one of the players had a deck of tarot cards, you could use those as the prop for the Deck of Many Things. Anyways, now what they're doing is they're going to have 66 cards, not 22. But the idea isn't necessarily that you're going to use all 66, because what they tell you is that now you can customize which cards are in the Deck of Many Things in your game. That in itself doesn't sound that bad, right? But I mean, what they're suggesting is that apparently you can do everything from having, like, for low-level characters, you could have a Deck of Many Things that's only like 8 cards, and it's like the less powerful ones and something like that, right? You can choose to not have any bad cards in the Deck of Many Things, right? Because really the bad cards are just, you know, they're not nice. So like, why would you have them? You know, like that kind of thing, right? Like that immediately tells me that they missed the entire point of the Deck of Many Things. The Deck of Many Things is actually a uniquely interesting item because it's a lot like, I mean, I would say it's a cursed item, right? And it's a cursed item not in the traditional D&D sense, because I think D&D, one of the things it's never done all that great is cursed items. So like the typical D&D cursed item is a -1 sword, let's say, that forces you to keep it, right? Like you literally can't get rid of it. It's always in your hand, or you can't draw any, you're magically enchanted that you can't draw any other weapon than the -1 sword. and of course it gives you a penalty to hit, but you're basically forced to use it. And that's frankly, that's pretty boring, right? So in my games, a lot of what I like to do, and you see this in some of the kind of cursed items that I've had in Lion and Dragon and the old school companion and stuff like that. I want a cursed item to be an item that does something that is actually really useful, but it has a downside. And so that's where it comes in, right? And a lot of them actually, what they have is that it's really useful, and it might have a minor downside, but then there's also a tiny chance that you could end up having a major downside, you know? And so then it becomes this kind of, you're spinning a roulette wheel, right? Where one of the places the little ball could fall in is you're completely screwed, right? But then it's the player's own temptation for power, right? So in fact, my cursed items tend to be very powerful, but they're very risky. And I think that makes a much more interesting type of play with cursed items than something where where it's not powerful at all, but you're forced to keep it. You know, there's a time and a place for those too. You can use those, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that ever, but I'm saying that it's a lot more interesting to have magic items that have downsides, and that the downsides can be really serious, but you the player are tempted to use it anyways, in moments of maybe at first in moments of emergency, maybe it gets better as you go along, and so you become more tempted. But the point is, you've got to figure out a way that the player is going to be reluctant. He's going to be like, yeah, I know this is dangerous, but maybe, like it's so good, stuff like that, right? And the deck of many things was that. It was that, right? Because you draw the cards, and you can get incredible benefits from it if you get one of the good cards. But you know that in there's 2 or 3 cards that will absolutely screw you, right? And that was the genius of that, and why it's such a memorable item. And now these guys are saying, no, but you can have one it's only good, right? Like it's all good. And actually the meta story that they create in this product, which includes, again, the autistic lesbian paladin, is such that essentially it kind of implies that the bad parts of that deck are an unfortunate side effect, or something that wasn't meant to be there in the first place, right? So like now basically you can do anything from like a tiny deck that you give people at low level to like you could of course just use the traditional 22 cards, but they have a bunch of other new cards, and it also, what they've chosen for the other new cards are like they're quite lame from what I heard, right? Like a lot of them are just descriptions of stuff you find in a dungeon. So it's like, how what is it in that the Newsman movie, right, where you have the I think it was Steve Carell's character, that he's just naming things that he sees in the room, right? He goes, "I love lamp," like this is them doing that, right? So like one of them is like the door, right, and another one I guess would be like the chest, right? And most of them, from how they've described it, like there's one called the ring, and guess what? When you draw it, you get a magic ring. Like this is lame ass stuff, right? Because they don't have the depth of sophistication of understanding kind of the layered qualities that clearly whoever made the original deck of many things, I don't know if it was Gygax or someone else, had at least looked a little bit at like what tarot cards were. And he didn't want to just use the tarot cards. Maybe it was Gaius, Gaius is Christian, and so he didn't want something that was like that could look too much like the tarot. He was like, a Midwestern Christian, so he probably wasn't into actually using that stuff, but he was probably the type of guy that also might have like read about that stuff, right? I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe some of you know who actually invented the deck of many things. I'm sure someone has talked about it at some point in its history, but the point is that it was like, that these were cards that the symbol on the card did not necessarily give away exactly what you were gonna get or what was gonna happen, right? And it sounds like the new ones are basically that, right? Like they're completely superficial, much like everything that these people do these days, But then besides that, but wait, there's more, right? The cards, they've decided that it's just having the deck of many things working the way it normally does is not enough. Like that's too boring for them, right? And it doesn't give you enough stuffs to use. Oh, hang on, we've got a super chat here. I've got to interrupt myself. Sadwings Raging, $10 super chat. Thank you so much. He says, Meatball has cursed me by capturing my cold, dead 3 sizes too small heart. Yeah, well, Meatball will do that. Thank you very much, Sad Wings. All right, so one sec. So the thing they also do is that they've now decided that every single card in the deck of many things is not just can be used like in the traditional way of you shuffle it, you name how many you're going to draw, and you draw, and then those effects happen. But also each individual card has a special magic 1 use per day power. And so, you know, if you've got the card, you know, and you might not, so you might have to go collecting the cards to build a deck or something. So suddenly it's like, what is it, Card Captor or whatever? It's goddamn Digimon or something. I don't know anything about these shows, so I'm just naming things I've heard, but you get the drift, right? They are so you'll get the card, and the card lets you use a special power when you show it, and then later you have to collect the whole deck. Once you collect the whole deck, then you can get the, you know, the other effects of it, right? Which is, I think, just stupid, right? Like, just do something with other. You could invent another deck of cards that wasn't the deck of many things, and have it work like that, right? But this is dumb, you know. They also have elements of the because they're providing you with this deck, right? That is like it's clearly designed by people who've made like tarot decks or whatever, right? So it's like the same artistic stuff, and you know, although some of the art that I saw them showing off was pretty crappy, I think, and it's not, you know, it's not good. I mean, some people might like it, but I don't like it. So to give you more use out of the deck, what they also have come up with is this method of adventure design by tarot card spread, or by, well, deck of many things card spread, right? And so to me it seemed extremely lame. And what it is like a spread, a layout, just like, you know, like if you've gone to tarot readers or you've seen people doing, most people who do tarot readings today, you know, the kind of new age tarot reading, they do something which is called a spread, which is that they lay out a set of cards. You know, there's the famous Celtic cross spread, which is like a cross with then a row at the side, and each place represents a single thing. And apparently, you know, the cards can mean one thing if they come upright, and another one if they come up reversed, like upside down. All of that is from modern tarot culture. And incidentally, it's a completely wrong way to read the tarot. It has nothing to do with the traditional way. That was all invented around the early 1900s by Arthur Edgar Wade, and it was an intentional alternative to revealing the real way to read tarot cards, which he had learned from a secret society and was oath bound not to reveal. So in his book, he had to come up with some other nonsense, right? But today, it's how most tarot readers think is the ancient and traditional way of reading tarot. But in this product, what you're going to do instead is you're going to lay out a spread, and that spread will be to create the adventure. So the first card that you draw, and every card will have, like in the book, it gives you cues for person, place, thing, monster, character, whatever, right? And so like the first card that you draw is where the players start the adventure. And so it might be at the tavern, or it might be somewhere else, right? So like, depending on which card you draw, that says where they start. And then there's like the different steps of the adventure that are laid out there in the spread. And you know, if I had the slightest confidence that these people know how to do a generator, you could say, well, that's interesting. I think it's not fast enough. It's, you know, it's needless additional nonsense compared to, you know, using a good random table generator. But I get that it's a gimmick for the product, right? But the problem is I don't have any confidence in their ability. Like, they can't even make normal adventures right. So how the hell are they going to make an adventure generator right? You know. So there's the idea is that, you know, that the things are also all tiered for per level play, right? The idea, just like with a lot of their other products, is that you can start doing stuff with this from level 1, and there, like, the risks and rewards are going to be low level risks and rewards, and then they'll start going up as you go up in level. Before I go on to the next part, my next comment, I'm going to just try to catch up a bit, seeing what people have been posting, just to make sure I'm not missing any important commentaries. Seafire says, "Oh no, a customizable deck of many things. Does it come with commons and rares?" Well, that's the only thing they didn't do yet, as far as I know. They didn't make it into a collectible product. Oh, sorry, says, if you take away all the bad cards, they will take all the cards. Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the point? You know. Where were we here? Seafire says, I thought the autistic lesbian paladin was a joke, but no, it's actually real. Why am I not surprised? It's ma'am. Saturn's raging. World takeover confirmed. Collectible, customizable deck of many only good things. That's where we're at now. Well, it's not collectible, apparently. Like, that's meant to be, those 66 cards are the only ones that are there. But don't give WotC any ideas, because maybe that'll come next, right? Roy Goodman says, I'm surprised they didn't tie the deck of many things with Magic the Gathering. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Well, just you wait. It might happen. Chris Miller says, everything WotC does is very vanilla and safe because they're afraid of offending anyone. Yeah, that is true to a point. Yeah, except, you know, the wokeism. They don't mind doing that. Spencer Wright says, they stole the idea, I think you mean of the tarot card spread from Ravenloft, the original Ravenloft. Well, yeah, kind of. But I mean, like, okay, I know what you're talking about. In Ravenloft, you have the tarot cards, and in the original Ravenloft adventure, you would have a random draw that would determine certain very specific things in the adventure, though. So it was like, where is this object or something like that, or, you know, like that sort of thing, that out of a list of a couple of different options. So it's not the same. This is like a pseudo freeform adventure design method that they've come up with, where the idea is that if you, like, you know, you draw these 9 random cards out of your deck, and out of those you create an adventure. It's not just like to fill in certain gaps in an adventure the way that the Ravenloft product did. Steel Mongo says, WotC isn't afraid of offending me. Yeah, exactly. Ask Kyle Brink about offending people. Okay, so we're caught up here. So let me continue. So then they go on to, like, you know, the guy. Okay, there's this guy who's being interviewed. His name is Jason Tondro. Now, apparently, because until now, the person we'd heard about associated this was somebody, an individual known as Mackenzie DeArmas, who is I believe, a person of color, autistic lesbian. And surprise, surprise, the main character, the main hero of the Book of Many Things, is just a Mary Sue projection of herself. You know, we've seen that before, right? That's basically par for the course, isn't it? So this Mackenzie DeArmas, though, is someone who basically doesn't know anything about design. Really. Like, I mean, they've theoretically been involved in a couple of projects, but, like, they're mostly famous for complaining on the internet about how awful D&D is, right? So, like, they needed someone with more ability to be on it. And the person they chose is this guy, Jason Tondro, who has basically done some crap level Pathfinder stuff, and who very clearly doesn't have a very, like, this is their superstar. This is the ringer they put in to cover for Mackenzie DeArmas' ineptitude. And he is at best a lower tier mediocrity, right? Like, this is sad, right? Like, this is where the moment where I said, okay, so, like, I think WotC is pretty much doomed at this point. and the reason I say that is it's because you know, they now. Okay, let me start with this. A lot of what I'm seeing about this Book of Many Things tells me that it seems to be in a way kind of like it has a multiple personality syndrome, right? Because part of it is this super woke story that was clearly at one point meant to be like the centerpiece of the product about Mackenzie d'Armas as a you know, autistic lesbian paladin and her Medusa girlfriend. And how amazing they are, and they create the deck of many things and defy the gods and live happily ever after, right? So like woke story garbage, right? Basically. So it looked like that seems to be following the track of the WotC books that have come out recently, right? I mean, but the thing is, you know, it takes a long time to produce one of these products. So from start to finish, it's probably a couple of years from like the very first initial concept of what are we going to make as our product in late 2023. You know, that's happening back in 2021 where they start, you know, brainstorming the ideas. And along the way, I think what happened is that they were working on this, and it was I think it was like the Mackenzie d'Armas show, right? And they were going to make it mostly about the wokeness, right? And then as that was happening, suddenly, you know, you had you know, Candlekeep came out, and then Wild Beyond the Witchlight, Ravenloft first, then Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and then Strixhaven, and then the Radiant Citadel. And as all of this stuff was happening, WotC has been seeing their sales diminish, and they've been seeing the problems and the backlash, right? So at some point, probably, I'm going to guess it was probably around either when Wild Beyond the Witchlight or Strixhaven came out, somebody from above, Kyle Brinks or whoever, said to these guys, oh, okay, hang on. We've got to start changing course here, right? And so then, now they obviously couldn't just fire Mackenzie d'Armas, because then the, you know, the woke mobs would come after them. You know, how dare they fire an autistic lesbian of color, right? So they had to keep some of that. But then I think that a lot of what they did is they suddenly retooled and said, we're going to make this a really crunch heavy product, right? So that's why you now have the adventure design thing. That's why you have the special individual powers. And that's why there's lots of other stuff I haven't even started telling you about yet, right? Like you can use the deck of many things to create, to randomly generate puzzles or riddles or traps that Tondro claims are inspired, right? So like basically they hired in this guy, like, and you can also now you can use the deck of many things to determine a player character's astrological sign, right? I'm going to get to more about that in a moment. So like lots of this stuff, right? And you know, stuff that's crunch basically, and so they had to get someone who was capable of doing that. Mackenzie d'Armas obviously wouldn't know the first thing about doing that, so they got Jason Tondro, right? But this was like the best they could get. This was like their, you know, they were so desperate that he's apparently a white man, right? So like that's how they went along with it. But you know, that's how far they were willing to go. I mean to say. So, but Tondro obviously doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, right? He's obviously at best a middling mediocre, I'd say low to middling mediocrity in terms of game design understanding, right? So like, first of all, he isn't all that familiar with D&D, clearly, because in this video, at one point, he says, well, you know, there's a lot of stuff about the original deck of many things that is kind of lacking, right? So he says, like, there's one card that says that you are pursued by a fiend. And the thing is, they never tell you what a fiend is. Yeah. And I'm like, well, did you look at the first edition monster manual, right? Like that's where you find what the fiend is, right? Like you don't need that. There's nothing that you need to know besides that, right? And he was like, oh, then there's another card that gives you a 4th level fighter, but again, they don't tell you anything about him. You know, a 4th level fighter, that's all you need to know about him. That again, D&D player's handbook. You make a 4th level fighter. That's it, right? But he's saying this like as if these were like fatal flaws in the product. And then his solutions to these things, right? So for the fiend, he says, well, here's what we're going to do. Where in our product, when you get the card that gives you a fiend, we give you an option of 3 different types of fiends that can appear. One that's low level, one that's mid level, one that's high level, right? So like this is the most idiotic solution possible, right? So it's a solution that a really bad game designer would do. He'd be like, we're going to give you, these 3 different fiends, one that's weak, one that's medium, one that's strong. With the idea that it goes, it's not a random or something. It's got to go according to the level of the person that drew it, right? So if a 4th level character draws that card, they're going to get a low level fiend. If a 12th level character draws that card, they're going to get a high level fiend, because it has to be balanced, because otherwise it's not fair, So like that instantly tells you this guy's a bad game designer, right? But then like with the 4th level fighter, well, hang on, with the fiend, right? Like what they could have done if they wanted to make it interesting is that was the moment to put in a set of random tables to generate random demons, not unlike the random demon tables that were once in, the AD&D DM's guide. That would have been an interesting thing to put in there. But instead of just producing 3 stat blocks and that's it. So this guy misses the point. And his solution to the 4th level fighter thing, he goes, well, we've decided that instead of getting a fighter now, when you draw that card that used to give you a 4th level fighter, what you're going to get is a golem made out of playing cards, who is called the Deck Defender. And the artwork for it is horrible, by the way. You look at that, you're going, that's the thing that you're proud of. Like it's just horrifically bad artwork. The Deck Defender is made like it's a golem that is made of a deck of cards and can fight like either it can switch from being a fighter or a barbarian or a monk, right? And this is his solution to that. Like it's just, like it's a combination of bad design and bad taste. It's really sad. So let me take a look at some of your comments here. Pundit, is EN World a banned word? I don't believe so. I don't know. I mean, do you mean on YouTube? I have no idea. I'm not a fan of N-World, if that's what you're asking. The RPG site is the only really good forum to talk about RPGs, but yeah. Al says, why is an Asian appropriating Greek culture? Yeah, well, that's a very good point, isn't it? But I guess it doesn't matter. There's one group of people whose culture you can appropriate. Roy Goodman says, does anyone else think WotC is leading the TTRPG industry with the new VTT? Well, in essence, they are. Yeah, I was just saying earlier, I don't know if you just got here, but I was saying earlier that it's very clear to me with the type of product that this product I'm talking about now, the Book of Many Things, is a $100 deluxe collectible thing, is that they're going to do almost everything that they do from now on. It's going to be on the VTT, and what they're going to publish in book format is going to be just, like these special collectible deals, Yosemite Mike says, these people make all of their characters into Mary Sue self-inserts. Everything has to be all about them. Well, there's this thing that has been pointed out that, in imagination play, when boys, or I guess men, imagine something heroic, they imagine themselves becoming that hero, right? Like they imagine they are, if you have little boys playing Batman, that little boy wants to imagine himself as being like Batman, right? But when girls play imagination stuff, they end up imagining the thing as being more like them, right? So when they're playing with Barbies, it's not that they're more like Barbie, it's that Barbie behaves like they do, and it's like them. And that's something that's very clearly what goes on with wokeists of whatever gender, that to them, they're such narcissists that everything should be like them. Like, what better character could you have than themselves, Let me see here. Yeah, Seafire says, they're funny like that. The idea of playing a character unlike themselves is unthinkable. Yeah. L says, pundit, Tondro looks like the villain from Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs too. I've never seen that whatever that is, but That sounds funny. Chris Miller says a fiend is obviously a cis-white Trump supporter. Let me see here. Yosemite Mike says fiend is a defined category of creature. The game tells you what that means. Yes, but apparently Tondro doesn't know enough about D&D to know that. Osiris says deck defender, an inferior form of Windows Defender. Calvinani says, well, with deck defenders, no one is getting pregnant. Yosemite Mike. El says Yosemite Mike. These people are all from on Microsoft. Yeah, well, the executives now of WotC and the D&D division are both from Microsoft, and so is I think so is the CEO of Hasbro now, right? Chris Cox. So yeah, okay. Carrying on. Other stuff that you need to know about this. So I mentioned one of the things they now have. So like ostensibly part of the story that they create in this in the Book of Many Things about how the Deck of Many Things was created is that it's set in Greyhawk, right? And you had this autistic lesbian paladin named Asteria, who falls in love with a Medusa, who is a good Medusa, of course, because nowadays monsters are good, right? Like almost all monsters are good. If you want to kill them, you're the one that's the bad guy, right? Instead, you're supposed to apparently have lesbian sex with these monsters. that's the point now of D&D as far as these people imagine, right? So there's this good aligned Medusa who falls in love with the paladin, and the good aligned Medusa has some kind of is in some kind of a problem, and then the paladin goes so far as to defy the goddess of fate of Greyhawk, and makes her pull down entire constellations from the sky to put their power into this deck that then afterwards allows both Mackenzie the Arma's paladin and her Medusa girlfriend to live forever, and then they happily retire as lesbian women doing lesbian women things. And that's the story, right? So now, as part of that story, and I'll go into a bit more detail about that later, but as part of that story, one of the things that is now suggested in the product is that the deck is tied to the astrology of the Greyhawk setting, and that so you can use the deck to determine what a player character's astrological sign is. Right now I've made in the old school companion, you see the section on advanced astrology. Right, Lion and Dragon has astrology, medieval astrology, that just focuses on the kind of the fortune telling part of it. But astrology was used for other stuff too, right? And so in my advanced astrology book, which came out in Pundit Presents and was then reprinted in the old school companion 1, I talk about how you can use astrology to generate an auspicious date, right? So if you make an astrology check, you can ask what's the best day to do a certain thing, and so then in the game that means you'll get a bonus to do it, right? And you can use astrology as a DM. You can determine someone's astrological birth sign and give them certain modifiers that are sometimes good and sometimes bad, obviously, to to different things depending on their birth, right? The date of their birth. And then you can also use astrology to do other stuff, like to make magic potions and to invoke spirits and things like that, right? But anyways, the point is I'm looking at what you could do in the game with astrology using the medieval sources of what they were, right? And if that's what this was like, that might be pretty good, right? Like if it was that, okay, so you're from this sign of the Greyhawk zodiac, and that means you get a +2 to saves against something, right? Or you get if your character is a wizard, he starts with an extra spell. Or maybe it's the opposite. Your character has disadvantage on a certain type of saving throw because he was born under a bad sign. That would make it really interesting. Of course, they're not going to do that. No. In the astrology of 1D&D WotC, what what you get instead is that when you get your astrological sign, it tells you about what your character's personality should be like, including what would be his favorite color. I'm not shitting you here. This is real, okay? You're when you get to learn what your player character's star sign is, instead of it being something that, you know, affects your destiny and fate in a significant way, or that gives you modifiers good or bad to the game. No, you discover what your favorite color is, your favorite animal, your favorite gemstone, etc., right? So it's like literally girly astrology 2023 style, okay? That's the astrology that they have in Deck of Many Things, or in Book of Many Things, sorry. So it's just absolutely ridiculous. And you know, so in other words, they don't really know how to do good options anymore, right? Like neither Armas, obviously, but also Tundra, the guy they brought in as their ringer, doesn't know how to make playable content, you know, or he does, but only the most marginally playable, you know, and has a bunch of stuff that's just garbage, you know. And so this is really tragic, right? They don't know how to give you good options. Like in that thing with the Fiend, right? Where you get there are 3 stat blocks, and it's all about, you know, going along with the challenge rating, right? Instead of having, you know, random tables and variables and things. And this is especially sad because this isn't some distantly lost art, okay? I don't know how many of you have looked at the 5e DM's guide, okay? But the 5e DM's guide is probably, in my point of view, the second best DM's guide of any D&D main edition, right? Like after the first edition one, it's the best one. It is full of optional rules, modular rules. It's full of random generators. It's full of like generator systems. It's got a thing for making random dungeons, just like the first edition AD&D DMG had. It's just chock full of options for the DM, and options that are not just, you know, pick from this tiny, you know, either or scenario, but rather like giving you wide options of things you can do. It's got content that is, you know, for crunch, and content that is for, you know, generating adventure seeds and all sorts of stuff. So this is not that long ago. This is the beginning of the edition that is still current, right? And now it's devolved into this garbage. So that's how bad the decline is. It's not. We're not talking about not living up to the standard of Gygax. This is not living up to the standards of Mike Merles with a bit of help from me, right? That's the standard they failed to live up to, you know. So they don't know how to do good options anymore. It's very, very sad. There's more nonsense coming, but I'm just going to catch up on the chat again here just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yes, I'm about to talk about the Medusa. Timothy Shanks says, I don't understand why WotC has 10 or 20 vice presidents on payroll when they only produce 2 games. They have, I believe, 20 executives, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And of course, that's just a massively top-heavy institution. And of course, the funny thing is that all of them are white, including Kyle Briggs. He's still there. So you know that they've literally threatened his family. I'm pretty sure that's how it is, right? Because you know that he wants to go. He can't leave soon enough. He's said it himself. You know, white guys like him cannot leave the hobby soon enough. But obviously, WotC itself is holding him hostage at gunpoint, forcing him to still be there and not be replaced by a person of color. It surely can't be that he's not actually referring to himself, but just thinks that regular gamers shouldn't play D&D if they're white. You know. Seafire says, has anyone made a deck of fate or something similar where you draw a card only in desperation? Well, I've done somewhat similar to that. I mean, I've done magic items. Like, again, this is very much in the coin of what I would call a cursed item. So in my last Sun campaign, there was an item that these guys had at one point found, which is called the Horn of Gonzo. And it was basically a magic item. Like, there was another one that they've had for a really long time that Bill the Elf has had forever, which is the Horn of Dutchman, where he blows the horn and 2d6 Dutchmen with crossbows appear to help him out. But the Horn of Gonzo is different in that every time it's blown, something unpredictable happens, right? Sometimes it'll be good, sometimes it'll be bad, sometimes it'll be useless. a lot of times it'll be kind of useless for the context of whatever you're trying to do. But it's a last ditch thing, right? And there have been times when there are times where it can be useful, and so the player characters realize that. But then there are other times when it doesn't seem to do much of anything. But there are some times when it's just really inopportune. And unfortunately, in that group, in that party, the player character who had the Horn of Gonzo, who I believe was that the neutral warrior? Yeah, I think it was the neutral warrior. I think. Anyways, they were in this scenario in this city where they had been trying to they'd gotten a hold of an artifact that determined the leader of the city, right? The Doge of the city. And it was this kind of Renaissance setting, right? And this Renaissance area of the world of the Last Sun. And they ended up having to try to like work out a peace deal between these two like rival groups that wanted control of the city. Mostly because they needed to get something, and so they needed to solve this problem so they could carry on with what they actually wanted to do, right? And they finally managed to work out a negotiated truce, a peace. They make up peace between they weren't called this, but like the Montagues and the Capulets or whatever, right? And then they're all having a big party, and I forget why, but for some reason, the neutral warrior, whoever it was that had the Horn of Gonzo, decides at a given moment to blow the Horn of Gonzo in the party, just to see what would happen. And it created this huge sound wave that caused, I think it was like 3d6 damage to everybody in the area of effect, right? So basically, they killed off almost the entire ruling family that they had just put into power, and then everything went to hell after that. So it was a very funny use of that. I had another one too, which was this deck that's based on like a legend of that's I think it's a Renaissance era legend of like a cursed deck of cards that you would like. It was basically a wish granting item. And so, like, this is one of the only items in Last Sun that I've had where you can like literally make a wish, like the wish spell. And the way you do it is you have to state what you want your wish to be, and then you have to draw. I believe it's 3 cards, right? And so those cards have to come out to a lower numerical total than 21. If they're 21 or less, you're safe. But if you go over, then the devil comes and takes your soul down to heck. Heck being the lesser of the infernal realms. So that was that sort of stuff is pretty fun, right? So again, big rewards but big risk. That's the key to cursed items. Odamanjiro says Medusa did nothing wrong. Ovid probably. Chris Miller says the leftist ideology is essentially evil by nature, and they don't want the bad stigma they get from worshiping Moloch or wishing death on Jews. Yeah, exactly. Well put. Timothy Shank says Greyhawk's astrology is a bunch of second edition bull fan fiction. Yeah, but I mean, at least in Greyhawk, it was like I guess you're talking about the From the Ashes box set or whatever, one of the Greyhawk books from the second edition. But at least it wasn't this. It wasn't like, oh, your favorite color is green, and your favorite, crystal is the emerald, and your favorite animal is the bull, or something like that. Like it's just so ridiculous that I am offended on so many levels by that. Let's see what else here. Oda Manjiro says the Elder Scroll video games did better star signs. I'm going to choose to believe that. I don't play video games, but I would guess they would. It'd be hard for them to do it worse, right? It'd be hard for them to pick something more stupid to do with it. You're winning, Chris Miller says, you're winning fantasy lotto numbers are 1, 23, 47, 13. Chris Miller says, I can't wait for my barista/paladin to learn Zimzur's favorite color and whether or not I will find love in this adventure. Elle says, Pundit, you're biased on the 5e DMG for obvious reasons. Well, yeah, but I mean, my role on the DMG was less than my role on the player's handbook. Let's put it that way. So it's not a lot of it isn't because it's about me. There were stuff I did that is in, you know, that I was involved in, that is in the player's handbook, in the DMG. But it's because honestly, if you look at it, you know, objectively, it's an incredibly good, like, you know, the DMGs for like 3rd edition, for example, and 2nd edition were a lot less about that kind of DM toolkit stuff, right? They were much more about, you know, regulating rules that are for the DM, and a couple of little things about adventure design, usually some essay that has got no gameable content, and then all the magic items, right, which had to be included in that, you know, and so usually most DMs will only use it to look up magic items, you know, but the resources in the 1E DMG and in the 5E DMG are very worth looking at if you're going to run 5E or 1E, right? That's what makes them so good. Roy Goodman says, Pundit, I wish you'd won those disagreements with Mike Merles. Well, yeah, I mean, there are a few things where well, there are a lot of things you listen to me on, right? But there are some things that were a bridge too far, you know, like they were just too radical, you know. Oda Manchiro says 10 execs per game. Yeah, exactly. Mago Vor says, if academia is any indication, diversity staff will outnumber the actual plays. Well, remember, for every product that they're coming out with, they have three separate diversity officers that are looking at every word that is published, word by word, every published word in that product. So yes, they have like not one, but I mean, even in the Soviet Union, in like nuclear subs, they only had one political commissar, right? Here they have 3 of them, because that's how much they have to police you. Let me see what else there is here. Charles Anderson says, does the Horde of Gonzo have a chance to summon the same name Muppet? No, but you caught me exactly on what was the inspiration. Like, I mean, obviously it was a double entendre, right? Because Gonzo is the style of game of World of the Last Sun, but it's also because, of course, those of you who remember the Muppet Show, Gonzo would blow the horn at the end of the thing, and always it would be some weird thing that would happen, right? So that was where I got the idea from. Steambub says, why don't you think more 5e games use the optional rules? Well, I've talked about this before. It is the great tragedy of 5th edition, right? We designed it. Mike Merles and me, we talked about this extensively, and it was both of our visions that we were totally both in agreement on this right from the start, right? That what we wanted it to be was the ultimately modular D&D, so that you could take the basic rules and then have all these tools for you to modify them to make your campaign exactly fit what you want it to be and the type of world you want it to be in, so that you could, you know, so like our vision was that everybody was going to run the campaign differently, right? That every single campaign was going to have mods that were going to fit that campaign. And so like it would be like the special rules of this campaign are this and this and this from the DMG, or stuff that we've thought up too that we put in there, right? So that was the hope, but instead I guess we failed to understand what the audience was, right? Mike and I believe we're both Gen X. I'm Gen X. I'm pretty sure he's Gen X. I'm pretty sure he's not quite young enough to be a millennial. And you know, we were thinking about what people like us would love to have, right? But their culture is not that. They want to be told what to do. They need someone to tell them this is the authoritative rule. That's how Jeremy Crawford ended up being their god, because they would go to him and you know, because he typed a lot of the words in D&D, so that was important role. And they would go to him and ask him, oh, you know, can you adjudicate this rule? And that would become the new rule. Like, they just want everything to be completely top down for them, right? And so you know, almost no D&D campaign runs any different from the standard, right? They all want to just play it that way, nothing else, you know. And that's so sad, because it is actually one of the best. I'm pretty sure it's the best edition for modifying, right? Like, in terms of having the support in the DMG to let you change the rules yourself in a way that's not going to break the game, right? Because try to change the rules on 3rd edition. If you touch anything about skills or feats or the powers that the player can just get, unless it's the tiniest thing, you break the game. But that doesn't happen in 5e. So this was made for being modifiable, and Jay just didn't care. So it broke my heart. Chris Miller says, Pundit, you dodged a bullet by not being more attached to 5e. Well, I don't know about that. I think in some ways I get the worst of both worlds, right? But obviously OSR people are not especially impressed by me having been involved in 5e, right? I understand that. But again, I wasn't designing a game that I would love to play. I was designing the game that I thought the most number of people would love to play. But on the other hand, I'm constantly having people try to, including certain people at WotC, trying to downplay my role in it, right? So, but anyway, that's all right. It's not a big deal either way. Sadwing says, give me the original Monster Manuel and I can run a game. I don't know who this Monster Manuel is, but I want to know what he does for you that allows you to run the game, Sadwings. Calvin Noy says, but Pundit, you weren't in charge of it in the end. No, I wasn't. The guy that was in charge was Mike Merles. He was the top guy. I was just being a consigliere or something like that, And in some cases, he might have been right. Like I was arguing very strongly that the default lethality should have been the middle level, not the easy mode, right? The easy mode is what ended up being the main one, right? Like instead, there are like, multiple different options, like easy, standard, and then, hard, right? Where, death was much easier. But he was convinced that the default had to start with easy mode death, like the death saves that are actually in 5th edition. And maybe he's right, because clearly, like one of the things that it seems that WotC 5e players don't like is anything bad happening to their character. All right. So carrying on here, there's other stuff that they brought up in this deep dive. So apparently there's a death card in the deck of many things. It's one of the original cards where if you draw it, literally the spirit of death comes and fights you, and you have to kill it or be killed by it. And so one of the things that they've created is a group of characters called the Grim Heroes, which are all the undead. That's like, they're like, oh, but what happens when death kills you? Right. Well, in most old D&D campaigns, that's it. You're dead. That's what happens. That's what's supposed to happen, right? In some of them, perhaps if it's very high level or something like that, and you just have bad luck and get killed anyways, maybe you can go to the underworld. You can do a planar adventure and try to rescue your friend's soul from the underworld. Or you could just resurrect him, maybe. I don't know. I don't remember if resurrection was allowed with that card or not. But because he doesn't know that, he just makes up something. So he said that when you die, you become an undead that lives on another plane that is called a Grim Hero. And the Grim Heroes basically want to destroy all of the decks of many things. And so they're if you I guess this is like a setup where if you have a deck of many things, you might end up crossing their path as they try to destroy your deck or what have you. And then there's a sun card in the game, right? And there's a group called the Knights of the Solar Bastion who are who live on a floating palace orbiting the sun, and they want to protect people from the dangers of the deck, and all of that is pretty lame. So about the lesbian paladin and her girlfriend. So, they've remade this story, right? Obviously, they've created this story, right? And it's one thing. Okay, Mackenzie the Armistice Mary Sue character, Asteria, is a paladin that is also a princess. That's mentioned. She's a paladin and a princess, She's basically perfect in every way. She's the hero of her people. And then she gets like swept up in some planar event that takes her away from those people, and that's where she meets. I think the way that Tondra pronounces it is Uriel, who is a good aligned Medusa. Now Uriel, which is the Medusa, is actually one of the cards, as you know, in the deck of many things, right? It's the one that turns you to stone, I believe. And so this is the thing, right? The character that Mackenzie made for herself, Asteria, is just a Mary Sue projection. It's garbage, useless, but at least it's not actually defiling something. Some of you were pointing out that Mackenzie de Armas is culturally appropriating Greek mythology, and there you are absolutely right. Yes, that is what's happening, because Uriel isn't just a name. What they really mean is Evriale, which is one of the three Gorgons, right? The Gorgons were the Medusa and her two sisters, of which Medusa was actually the least of the three sisters, right? Evriale was the most powerful one, right? And she was also the most evil one in some ways, right? Like Medusa is turned into a monster by tragedy, but in some of the are just because it's her nature to be one, right? And the word Evriale means far-reaching. So she would go around and roam all over the world, bringing doom to people. You know, she was like literally also more powerful as a monster, right? Medusa, if you glanced at her, you would be turned to stone. And so the same thing happens with Evriale. But in Evriale's case, she also has a cry, a shriek that can crumble stone into sand, right? So she can destroy even the stones, you know. So this is the character that, for politicized reasons and for personal narcissism, Mackenzie de Armas wants to project as a queered good character, which it just keeps amazing me, right? Like that movement of that kind of LGBT activism that seems desperate to take like absolute villains, sometimes even real life psychopaths, and transform them into queer icons, right? Like, why would you do that? Why would that be the thing that you would want to do if you're trying to claim that you are good people, but okay, so now Evriale is now good and kind and loving and whatever, and becomes the faithful wife of Asteria. No, wrong. She's not a good aligned Medusa. She's a worse monster, one of the worst monsters in Greek history, in Greek mythology. So this is absolutely an appropriation of a culture that, as far as I know, I'm pretty sure Mackenzie de Armas is not Greek, right? And so by their own rules, she doesn't have the magic blood that entitles her to use this character. And I'm pretty sure Tondro isn't a Greek last name either. So I'm wondering what happened to these diversity consultants that are there to watch for this sort of stuff, right? Like I guess Greeks don't count because they're too white to be, to not be appropriated. Let's look at some comments here. Pundit, I would have, Osiris says, Pundit, I would love to see your take on a Forgotten Realms type setting from you to appeal to as many people as possible. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the thing is, I've never been a big fan of generic fantasy myself, so it'd be hard for me to think up what I would want to do as a generic fantasy setting. I like serious historical fantasy. I like weird fantasy, right? Like science fantasy or Gonzo fantasy or stuff like that. I'm not sure I'd be the best person to do a kind of classic generic fantasy, but if I did, I would try to make it kind of Lord of the Rings style epic. Ray Goodman says, death card kills you. Now you can just go get resurrected at your bastion. Yeah, but you have to pay 99 cents for that. Oh yeah, Max says the skull card does not allow you to be restored to life. Thank you. Rational Ginger says the fact that they think people care about their self-insert fan fiction is baffling. Osiris says they think it is okay to take European culture. Yeah, well, apparently. David Brown says, I want to play a bard right now with Sleight of Hands, who's a notorious card shark that can shuffle and cut his deck of many things to pull out exactly the card he wants. Ray Goodman says they do this stuff because they are more amoral themselves. Yeah, exactly. They don't believe that there is such a thing as evil, right? So obviously anyone who's evil is just someone who's being oppressed. Unless they're MAGA people and then they're really evil, you know. Chris Miller says they want to normalize amoral behavior. Yes, that is correct. Mark Markham says, well, it's all Greek to me. Rational Ginger says, these people don't care about appropriation if it's not from an oppressed non-white culture. White people have no culture according to them. Yeah. Oh, sorry, says, to be honest, I'd just like to show others your generic fantasy setting so they could run that instead of woke Forgotten Realms, their cafe and pride periods in Waterdeep. Yeah. Well, you can show them World of the Last Sun. It's definitely not generic. It's weird and wacky, but Don Polite says, didn't you mention before that Mystara was your favorite mainline D&D setting? What is it about Mystara that you like? I don't know. Well, I like that Mystara is this ridiculous, crazy quilt of locations that are based on real world cultures, right? So like you have, you know, the Roman place, and then next to that there's the Viking place, and you know, across the mountains from that there's the Native American place, and you know, like all that sort of thing. I like that it's a hodgepodge. I kind of, part of what I like about it is that it doesn't try to make a lot of sense, right? It's just it has a bunch of places that are intermingled in ways that they would never normally be intermingled, and it just it's like you can imagine that the god of that world is actually the DM, and he's just put together all of this bunch of stuff together because it's playable. You know, and I think that's part of the secret, sort of the rule cyclopedia type game and the Mystara type setting, and why they go so well together. Roy Goodman says, pundit, that looks like a big old bud in that pipe. Well, it's not. It's Argento Latakia is what I'm smoking right now. All nationalities on Earth have a culture. It's human nature to have a culture, says John Fraser. Yeah, well, and I mean, culture appropriation is bullshit. But the thing is, it's also obvious that neither Mackenzie nor Tondro know anything about Greek mythology, right? Or, you know, they just don't care. Okay, so one final thing to point out, just to like to add this, just like the, you know, after the main course, and you know, along with the coffee, there's got to be some little tiny dessert just to give you one last dose of outrage. So one of the really important things Tondro felt that he should tell us all is that they have changed the names of 2 of the Deck of Many Things cards, because, you know, obviously they have to. It's the responsible thing to do. So You no longer have the card called the Idiot, because of course that's offensive to stupid people. And they no longer have the Vizier, because that would be cultural appropriation. So it's fine to take a specific character of Greek mythology and totally change her into something absolutely different to satisfy the lesbian narcissist fantasies of one of the creators. But using a word, the word Vizier, is now somehow offensive, right? Like Vizier is just a word. It just means, it's like a prime minister, basically, right? It's a title. It's the same as if you were to say, like, Lord of the Exchequer is offensive if you're not English. It makes no sense at all to be offended by that term in any way, right? A vizier is a thing, it's a title. Their suggestion is going, oh well, it's Orientalism, right? Well, what the hell are you doing using, Evriali in that way, right? To suddenly decide that the Greeks are all wrong and that the Gorgons are actually good, What gives you that right? So there you are. No Idiot card and no Vizier card. That is the final insult of this evening's coverage of the Dreck of many things. Will M says, does the new deck have the balance card, which changes the character's alignment? That's a very good question. I did not find out about that. I presume that it does still have that card and that is still its name, because they said that the only two of the deck that they were changing the name of was the Idiot and the Vizier. But it might be that the balance card works in some other way now. I mean, that might be an interesting thing to look up, although maybe they haven't said anything about that yet. I wonder. So, I mean, in the original 5th edition version of it, yes, it changes your alignment, right? But what about now? See if we can find anything here. Nothing there. Doing a bit of searching here, trying to see if I can spot what they would have done with it, because obviously they don't use alignment anymore, so they have to change that, right? Like that one can't possibly be what it used to be, because now alignment isn't a real thing anymore for them. So we know, by the way, that in October 28th, that this is something I've just gotten reminded to as I was trying to Google. They've cut up the release date. Like the release date has been extended indefinitely for Deck of Many Things. So that's another sign that they're trying to rework part of it. They claim it's about the actual deck of cards, right? But I'm guessing that a lot of it is that they've realized that the kind of woke bullshit is what's costing them. I think that there's now pressure from the executives to say, look, we're not about doing wokeness anymore. That doesn't sell. We're about doing boutique products that are we don't want to make them, they're not going to go full MAGA or something, but they obviously don't want it to be something that people will find too boring to buy, right, or too stupid to buy. And that's, unfortunately, stupid and boring is all that woke people can create, right? So who's to say when it comes out now, even? Yeah, I'm not finding what the balance card does. But that is a very interesting question. Osiris says, when they hear Vizier, they can only think of Jafar from Aladdin. Well, there were lots of bad Viziers. I mean, Sword and Caravan, There's Kizil Arslan, who is literally like, I think Kizil Arslan was like the archetype of the evil vizier, and well, him and his family, right? That for like 3 generations, they basically were the real power behind the Seljuk Turks of Hamadan. Well, the sultans were basically their prisoners, you know. So, and his wife was even, she was like legendary. She was like, you know, like Livia, the Roman empress. She was like that, but in the Silk Road. She was the Livia of the Silk Road. She this bloodthirsty, scheming, evil genius, you know. But none of that is racist. That's all that literally happened, right? This is all actual history, you know. David Brown says maybe it changes your gender instead of your alignment. I don't think that's the solution they're going to go for. Next version might have the I can't breathe card and the mob card. John Fraser says the people that are WotC now are low-rate writers that can't even write a second-rate comic strip. Yeah, of course, they're all trash. They're not even you know, like you could say, oh, they're diversity hires, but it's not that they're diversity hires. It's that they are nepotism hires, right? They're a bunch of woke activists that don't know very much about game design, that have then gone on to hire their friends that don't even know much about D&D. Most of them barely even played D&D, right? So that's why these products are so bad, because they don't really care about the product at all. This is just for them. This is a check that they're going to get and a chance to you know, express their narcissism, and that's it. They have no interest in the game or the hobby or the players or the people who are going to buy it, the customers. None of that matters to them. Oh, sorry, says the balance card switches your alignment to the opposite of yours. Yeah, but not anymore, because there's no more alignment anymore. You know, that's done. So I couldn't see that being what would happen, and I'm pretty sure that would be seen as something offensive, even if it could, you know. Yeah, it's a mystery. We'll have to find out. I'm sure that we will find out about it eventually. All right, so that was basically what I wanted to tell you guys about today. If you guys have more questions or something else that you want to talk about, we can bring it up before we finish. I really appreciate all of you guys for being on here. If any of you haven't subscribed yet, please feel free to subscribe and share my videos. And I thanks to the people that have done super chats. That's really nice of you. I really appreciate it. Check out all of my products, because you're bound to find good stuff, right? Like, definitely, if you're interested in something, in like incorporating astrology into your game, check out Lion and Dragons Astrology. The basic rules there, and then the advanced rules are in the old school companion 1, you know. And like all of the magic in my games are based on like how people actually thought magic worked in the period and at the time and at the place, right? So that makes it very different from the made up fantasy magic of D&D. Mac just did a $2 super chat. Thank you very much. Good stream, he says. Yeah, be sure to check out in the near future Giant Slayer games. I'll let you guys all know when we start that, but you know, basically you get 2 books a month for a low price, and those books are not going to be like, I mean, eventually I'll probably do like compilation volumes that'll be for sale to the public, but that'll be like months, maybe a year or more down the road, right? So if you want something, this is like you're going to want to do the subscription, and those will be the only place you'll find them is there, at least at first, you know. Some more super chats. Wow, thank you very much, guys. Wayne Brack, $10. He says, Gonzo book just shipped, PDF wonderfully full of ideas. Thank you. Yeah, is that do you mean the Gonzo Fantasy Companion? Is that the one, or yeah, I think that's what it's called. I forget what my own books are called at this point. I've written so many of them. But that one was relatively recent. You'd think I'd be able to remember that one at least. Seems like a long time ago, but it was just the start of this year. Jesus. Of course, the thing is, usually I finish writing these books, and then it's like a year later they come. Yeah, the Gonzo Fantasy Companion. Yeah, Gonzo Fantasy Companion is a great book, and it's like what I was talking about today about design. It's full of generators, right, and like stuff where you can make complex elements for your game just by doing a series of rolls, right, and that they're coherent. And like in the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, you can create like unlimited numbers of character races. You know, you can use, you know, there's a whole set of rules, a little bit inspired by like Eric Wujcik's mutant rules in TMNT, the RPG, for playing intelligent animal characters. You know, there's random designs for underground complexes. You know, like in the Gonzo style. Tons of stuff like that. You know, so you're going to find really, really good material in the Gonzo Fantasy Companion to add a bit of weird fantasy to your game. You know, Chris Miller, $10. I hope your books arrive soon. In the meantime, buy some tobacco on me. Thank you, Chris. It is not your fault that my books have not arrived yet. It is a combination of the publisher being late, and not the publisher, but the the fulfillment being late in printing them, and then the horrible Uruguayan mail service. But thank you very much anyways. I appreciate that. Thanks for the little tip there. Chaos Druid asks, I have an idea for a Black Powder era game world. Curious to know, have you ever considered Black Powder era history for a book or setting? Well, I guess it depends what you mean by Black Powder. I guess are you like suggesting kind of like the era of the English Civil War, or you know, the Age of Sail, the you know, or the Pirate Age, or that sort of thing? If so, I mean, I'm definitely not against that, but I like kind of the more medieval era, and remember that the late medieval setting had gunpowder weapons already, right? So like to say the Black Powder era. I mean, the Black Powder era starts around the early part of the 15th century in the sense of cannons and very primitive muskets, right? So that's one of the details in like Dark Albion. Like at the start of the timeline, there's no you know, it's the Middle Ages, and at the end of the timeline it's the Renaissance, and like at the start of the timeline there's, I think, one cannon in all of Albion, and then at the end of the War of the Roses, it's like gunpowder weapons are everywhere, you know, and that was just in a 30-year time span, you know. Yosemite Mike says it's pretty clear at least some of the people who write this stuff have never run a game for actual players. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And in fact, like, you know, I've spoken before about how there's a difference even among like good game designers between a product that you just make because you've thought it up, and one that that's a product of your gaming, right? Almost all of my stuff, there are some exceptions, but almost all of my stuff is a product of my actual gaming, right? Like I'm running a campaign, I come up with an idea, and then I you know, make that idea into a set of rules, and they work in the campaign, and then I end up using them in some future product, right? And that's a total different thing than a purely theoretical design, right? That in the sense of, you know, I've come up with this, but I've never even tried it, you know. Osiris says, hey, Pundit, do you think there's even hope for us in the TTRPG industry given the direction of the economy? Well, it's a good question. You know, it depends on how bad the economy gets. But in my experience, you know, having been through like previous downturns, yes, inevitably you do less well. Like actually, these last several months, I've noticed that there's been a downturn in sales, right, for me. And a not insignificant one, but you know, not enough that it puts me into any kind of a crisis, but it is a notable one, right? And I think that that's a product of a lot of people struggling in the economy, right? And so when people struggle, they're going to buy less optional things like RPG books. But it's also my experience that people don't ever necessarily stop. You know, like remember that in the Great Depression, Monopoly was a best-selling game, right? Because it came out, it was this game about getting rich in the middle of the Great Depression. But it was a board game. It was a completely unnecessary thing to buy, but a ton of people bought it. It became a fad at the time, right? And like, you know, people when they're having a hard time, it means that there's, you know, like the key is partly is that my products are affordable, right? So if the economy is down, the first thing people have to give up are like the really big expenses, right? Going on a cruise or going on vacation or, you know, buying a new car, right? And so then, but then people still need to have something, unless you're like, you've been, you know, unless you're completely unemployed, completely broke, or are working a job that you're barely making month to month, right? But, you know, where you're really in massive crisis. But for most people, it's like, well, you know, things are difficult, prices are up, the wages are frozen, but you still have to entertain yourself, right? And one of the nice things about the RPG hobby is that it ought to be at least an inexpensive type of entertainment, right? Where you can get some games, you can get some products. So I make a lot of products that are very affordable. That's something I've always tried to do with the RPG Pundit Presents and with now the Pundit files that are coming up. And that means that, you know, that's the sort of thing people might pick up because, you know, maybe they can't afford to buy an $80 deluxe RPG, right? But they can probably afford to buy Star Adventurer for $9.99, you know. In fact, with inflation, it's become even more affordable than it used to be, I guess, relatively speaking. Osiris says, how can we switch to DMs of 5e from the story path stuff to real D&D? Well, that's a hard question. I think that the more that people find out about the OSR, the more likely some of them are going to jump onto that bandwagon. But a lot of them are probably, you know, because they've been taught, you know, like one of my playlists on my channel is called D&D Stuff They Taught You Wrong on Purpose, right? Well, they were taught story paths wrong on purpose, and now they think that's the right way of doing things. So it's a bit of like, it's like deprogramming, right? You have to deprogram them from the brainwashing that they've been given, you know. And that can, I think, only happen by like first introducing them to that style of play in like OSR style. Or I mean, if you're willing to run 5th edition, run a 5th edition game, but tell them, well, we're going to run this as a sandbox. And you're probably going to have to explain what the hell a sandbox is, you know, and then give them that freedom, but like kind of curate it, ease them into it, right? Give them some hints, then give them some choices, and then let them start inventing choices for themselves. And all of a sudden they're playing in a sandbox, right? Because then it's actually a lot more fun to play in a sandbox once you get used to it. Once you realize that, no, you don't have to wait for the DM to tell you what the adventure is going to be. You can go out and look for it, or you can make your own. Or sometimes you can just wander around and there'll be an adventure that will emerge naturally as a result of random encounters and things like that, you know. Roy Goodman says, I think I've purchased all of Pundit's S&C books. Wonderful stuff. Awesome job with the art and layout. Beautiful books, man. Great job. Yeah, I'm very, very pleased with the everything that Mad Scribe has done for my books. I think all of them look so good. I always worry a lot about the books looking nice, you know, and these are definitely very high quality products. Raziel says Star Adventure rocks. Reagan says Star Adventure does rock. Thank you guys. Yosemite Mike points out, yeah, they assume that all PCs will act like characters in a movie and do because movie things because the scenario wants them to do it. Yeah, well, one of the things you have to emphasize on them if you want to like change their mind is to make it clear, okay, this is not a story. This is not a movie. This is a world, a real world, and you are people living in this world, and you have to understand that just because you know that it's not, you know, it's not going to be a cinematic world where plot twists will happen because that's the best thing for the story. It's also a place where some of you might die, you know, your characters might die for not particularly good reasons, right? And that's a part of the reality of the game. But that also means that everything you do matters now because you're not being led around by some DM who thinks he's an author, you know. All right. Well, I think we're about that time to wrap it up today. Thank you very much to everybody who came onto the stream. I really appreciate it. Oh, shit. John Fraser just said, I saw a tweet from Connie Chang in my feed where she was saying she was one of the first minority people to play D&D. I mean, my God, like there have been people that are, you know, minorities, as to say, not white people, that have been playing D&D since the 70s. Like, it's just ridiculous. These people are ridiculous. All right, on that terrible note, thank you, everyone, again. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed. Check out all my products and keep looking for future live streams. I don't have a fixed time when I do live streams, except anytime I hit a new peak of subscribers. But right now, we're only about a quarter of the way to 8,000 subscribers. But I will try to do live streams on those rare occasions where I have a Sunday or Monday where I don't have to either DM or do other secret things. So if you keep your eyes open, be sure to catch more of these live streams. I'll always try to talk about something interesting. And one of these days, I will have a guest star. I haven't done it yet, but supposedly it can happen. It can work. I just have to. I think I've got to send someone the link in advance. I'll work it out more in advance. I'm always like doing it at the last minute, and that's why I haven't brought in a co-host yet for any of these. And again, keep your eyes open. Coming very soon, the Pundit Files as a subscription service on Giant Slayer Games. Medieval Dream Magic from Spectre Press. That's going to be on DriveThruRPG. And before the end of the year, Baptism of Fire, which I'm very proud of, and I think you guys are really going to like. It is also, besides being a totally new setting for the kind of Lion and Dragon style, it's going to have a complete set of rules. It's not going to be, you don't need Lion and Dragon to play it, right? And the rules are going to be the Lion and Dragon rules, but they're going to be reworked for early medieval setting. A few changes to fit like the Polish setting of Baptism of Fire, and I'm going to add some of the expanded rules that showed up in the old school companion. So it's going to be like the expanded edition of Lion and Dragon. All right, so I guess that's everything for today. See you guys all very soon. Thank you very much. Still currently smoking the Ben Wade oversized Canadian. And take care, guys. How do I finish this? Is that it? No. Is this it? No. I don't know how to stop. End stream. There we go. See you guys later. Take care.